Hello everyone. Today you're watching the first episode of interview series with successful student. In this episode we will discuss two different things. The first part I will talking to Dr. Kathryn Jan about her personal life. Then I will shift the topic a little bit and talk about her academic achievements and academic life. So I want to welcome Dr. Jan, my best friend, to today's interview, and I am really happy you can make it to be here. Before starting the interview, I would ask Dr. Kathryn to introduce herself to us, then I can dig into more questions.
Cool, yeah. Thanks for inviting me on to this interview. My name is Kathryn. I'm originally from the Texas area. I went to undergraduate over at WashU in St. Louis, studying biochemistry and anthropology. Came back home for medical school and am now currently undergoing my anesthesiology residency over at UT Southwestern, which is, in Dallas. Yeah.
Thank you. So my first question is about medical field. Everybody knows studying medical in the US is full of stress and challenges. So I would like to know how you manage and control this stress during your study and exams.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. When it comes to stress, it comes from a lot of different sources, and I think you have to deal with each stress accordingly. And sometimes in the immediate, stress of things, it's good to have a little bit of stress, but then other times it can be very unhealthy and maladaptive. And so it's important to recognize what stress is good and what stress is bad and kind of work around that. And, first and foremost, finding a good time to get rid of that stress, to really wind down, have a place for yourself, have the time for yourself is very important. And having the good support system to, help you get through that stress, to even recognize which stress is good or which stress is bad. For instance, I had a lot of stress when I was studying for tests, and you think that, the further you go into here, the less stress that you would have, for a bigger test, but it actually just gets worse. You just get more and more stressed, thinking about the test that you have coming up. And so recognizing that, I'm able to use that stress and that fear to kind of help myself, study a little bit better, but also recognize that when I have the downtime, that I can be doing whatever else I like to do in my life, and I shouldn't be worrying about those things.
So interesting and cool. Okay, so tell me about when you had the biggest failure in your academic life, and how did you find a solution for that?
I don't know if I ever actually solved it, but I think my biggest failure is that I'm just very bad at learning languages, and so I really applaud the fact that your English is so good. But when I was little, I was sent to Chinese school a lot because, my family's in Taiwan, they all speak Chinese. Here I am not speaking any Chinese. And so I went to Chinese school when I was really little, and I went for 10 years. Oh. 10 years I went to Chinese school. And my Chinese is very, very bad. My Spanish is better than my Chinese. And I think recognizing why I failed was a very key part in my life, because I hadn't had much failure until Chinese school, and then I didn't even realize I was failing at first. They kept on pushing me and graduating me, even though I was getting 20% on all the tests. I actually went back and calculated I didn't know the answer to this. How many points would I actually get out? But every single test I said, they were oh, it's an 80, you passed, go on to the next level. And I wasn't learning anything because I was just assuming that I knew it already, or assumed that I was good to go. And so I think from that failure, I tried to learn Chinese again, really, really, really still suck at it. But I recognized that, you can't just be always giving good, positive feedback about things, that you need to be harsh and critical about yourself and about other things in order to help them grow.
It's a perfect answer. So I wish you can get fluent in Chinese.
I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. Like I said, my Spanish is better. It's hard because I don't use Chinese, so yeah.
Okay, for the next part, I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to just tell how you feel about it.
What?
The first word is medical school social life.
I think depending on where you go, it's very work hard, play hard. And so, I don't know, it's the stereotype that people are nerdy or jocks or popular. In medical school, everyone's a nerd. 'Cause, they got there from a lot of studying. And so it's just kind of funny watching all these people just geek out over very common things or have a big party together. I mean, medical students are just like normal people too, obviously. So it's just kind of funny when you mentioned that. But yeah, I met Anthony, my significant other, at a medical school party. So definitely lots of fun social things that could be happen. Yeah.
Nice. So the second word, video games.
I think video games get a bad rap. Like, outside of, like, actually people who play them. Like, people are just like, oh, you're just wasting your time on video games. But I think they're great. I think one of my co-residents told me, actually, that he was trying to do a procedure. And they're like, oh, do you play video games? And he's like, no. And they're like, oh, you should, because it helps with some of these procedures. Yeah. So I think video games are good. You can't just spend all of your time playing video games, but they're definitely, fun.
Yeah, I know you're a great fan. So what is your favorite one?
Ooh.
In video games?
I think it depends on what mood I am. Animal Crossing was probably one of my long-time favorite ones. But if you're looking for a good story and good art, The World Ends With You. It's by Square Enix, so the same people who make Kingdom Hearts and whatnot.
Anime.
I used to be bigger into anime when I was littler, but not as much now. Although I am trying to watch the new ones, but I haven't been getting through them because I just don't have as much time.
Okay, tell us 2-3 animes that you loved so far.
I mean, Death Note is a classic. Ouran High School Host Club was always my childhood favorite. It's kind of funny, a little bit cuter. And then more recently, I've been watching Spy Family, which I'm not a big fan of slice of the life, but it's a pretty cute anime.
Anesthesiology.
Good field. Everyone should go into it. Yeah. We need more anesthesiologists.
If you had a chance to back in time, 5 years, 10 years, would you like to change anesthesiology to other expertise or?
I don't think so. I think I was trying to decide between medicine and anesthesia during medical school. And I really like critical care. I'm doing a critical care fellowship in my future. And so there's multiple avenues to get there. Emergency medicine, surgery, medicine, and then anesthesiology. And anesthesiology is by far the quickest and I feel the most comprehensive out of all these different specialties. So no bad rap to anybody who goes into something else. But personally, for me, I think anesthesiology was a good fit.
That's great to be passionate about what you're doing. Okay, the next question. What is the most precious and valuable thing you have in your life?
I think probably my support system. Yeah. Not many people realize how valuable a support system is. I think growing up, I've dealt with some hardships and that if I didn't have my support system around me, I probably wouldn't have gone as far as I have gotten. And I think also, mentorship is something that's really good. Mentorship is so hard to come by that I definitely wouldn't have gotten as far as I did without them.
That's definitely true. Okay, let's start academic life questions. So, because lots of students are interested to know about your tricks, your endeavor through this medical school. So my first question is, we want to know more about the steps from start, when you started your pre-med to become anesthesiologist.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing because every single type of physician specialty is a little bit different. And then I like to tell undergraduate students, the medical field is very big and large, and you don't have to go into becoming a physician. There's also other avenues to the healthcare system. But they want to be a nurse or a PA or anything else. You should try to explore and realize that there's more than just this one single path. For an anesthesiologist, what you have to do is that you do your undergraduate, which is usually about 4 years. For me, I did it 3.5 because I graduated a semester early. You'll take a bunch of pre-medical courses, but there isn't necessarily a pre-med track in all different places, and you don't have to major in something sciencey. You can major in whatever you like. So I majored in anthropology in addition to biochemistry. During this time, you'll likely take the MCAT, and so that's kind of your entry into medical school, one of the very first big tests. Past the SAT and ACT, I guess. And then during medical school, that'll be about 4 years as well. Sometimes people do another degree with it. And so I actually have a Master's of Public Health in addition to my MD as well. And I managed to fit that all into 4 years. And you do pre-clinicals and then clinicals. And so 2 years or 1.5 years or 1 year, depending on what medical school you go to, it's just like all the book learning, all the stuff that you've been doing in undergraduate. It gets more medical focused, so it's kind of nice, but it's all just like sitting at books. You don't really have much context about like, oh, this disease does X, Y, and Z. It's not until you go to your rotations, which is the other half of medical school, that you really get to, feel out like, oh, this is a specialty for me, or oh, I like doing this procedure kind of thing. And then you go into residency. And that's broken down to the first year usually being an intern year, where you kind of just learn how to be a doctor, get good at ordering Tylenol because you've never had to order Tylenol for a patient before, that sort of thing. And then for anesthesia, then you get to do your anesthesia years. And so that's 3 years of anesthesia years in addition to your 1 year of intern year during your residency. And that's when you learn how to become a good anesthesiologist. You do like a little bit of subspecialty training, so like pediatric anesthesia or cardiac anesthesia. And then you have the option of doing a fellowship or not. And so that varies from like 1 to however many years you want to do fellowship or extra training. And then after that, you finally become like a full-fledged faculty attending anesthesiologist.
Okay, so which one is the shortest and which one is the longest in case of the years you're spending for residency? If you wanna...
I think the shorter ones are things like family medicine, internal medicine. If you go just straight from the beginning to the end, don't want to do a fellowship, that's usually about 3 years for your residency in total. So a lot of my people who went into family or medicine, they all are starting to look at jobs right now. And then the longest, if you did like pediatric neurosurgery, that's always like pediatric always lengthens your time, and then like a very heavy surgical subspecialty also kind of lengthens your time too. So there's some neurosurgeons that I get to meet because we also do neuroanesthesia, and they're like a fellow and they're like PGY8, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been here for so long. So PGY8 means postgraduate year and then your number, and so they're 8 years out of undergraduate, and so they're in their 8th year of residency / fellowship. Yeah.
So long.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, could you compare your pre-med life with your medical life? In case of challenges, exams, hardships you had?
Yeah, I think people say that as you go on, things get easier. In certain ways, things do. In certain ways, things don't. And so pre-med, I remember like kind of feeling dissatisfied because I didn't have a lot of context for things. I felt like I was very like helpless. Like I couldn't do a lot of things on my own. I didn't know how a lot of things worked, and I didn't feel like I was really directly impacting the healthcare of my patients. Although I probably did have some small impact, it's definitely more now during residency as compared to like the pre-med life. Also during pre-med, it's just like a lot of uncertainty about like what's going to happen in my future. And I still have uncertainties now, but definitely more as a pre-med. It's hard being a pre-med. It gets more competitive every single year.
So what is the biggest stereotype about medical students?
But they just study a bunch, which is partially true. I feel like, yeah, they study a bunch. I think some residents think that medical students are always, there's a stereotype of like a gunner medical student, one that's always like, brown nosing and like asking, oh, is there anything else I can do to help? And like pushing other medical students aside and being really selfish and being like, oh, I'll take this opportunity. Don't be like those. Don't be like those people. Most medical students are just normal people, though. Yeah.
So how many hours do you sleep and do you study?
It depends on the week. This past week, I've been averaging around 6.5 hours a week, or a day. Sorry, not a week. A day or a night of sleep. I try to get like a good 7 hours of sleep a night, and I think I'm one of the odd ones. And then studying, they actually ask us this to like fill out on our like monthly check-ins or whatever. And I say that I study about 20 hours a week, but I honestly don't have a good idea of how much I actually study. Probably a lot, but not as much as I did last year.
I've seen some students study more than 15 hours a day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think
that's not the thing.
When you have like a very big exam coming up, you'll hunker down and study a lot more. Like for the very first board exam for medical students called Step 1, we all made a study schedule. And so you'd have like hour 1, wake up. Hour 2, eat breakfast. Hour 3, study. Hour 4, study. Hour 5, study. Hour 6, that kind of thing. And goes all the way down until you go to sleep again. And so during that time, I was actually, studying about 15 hours or more a week, or a day, not a week.
Gosh.
But I had nothing else to do but study. So
okay, cool. So you have a lot of memorization in medical field. Did you use any special tricks or techniques to make that memorization easy?
So contextualizing everything, I think it's important to recognize that the things you learn, if they don't have a direct impact and if you're not seeing it every single day, it's not going to stick as better. And so like when I have a patient with X, Y, and Z, I try to look more into it and I try to place that association with that person and kind of get that feedback back. In addition to that, there's also like practice questions are very important. Should probably do those, as well as like spaced repetition. So things like Anki. It's a very popular like flashcard tool that uses spaced repetition to help quiz back things. I'm personally never really liked Anki, but I still do it anyways because it does help. Yeah.
Nice. So do you do more research or you are into more clinical practice?
Definitely more clinical for me. Not going to knock the people who love research because research is always a great thing, but I definitely like, interacting with patients a lot more, especially like even when I did research, it was all like clinical based research. And so never like anything in the wet lab or dry lab. I've left those days behind. It's a lot more like consenting patients and telling them like, oh, this is what we're going to do for your care. And we're either going to do this or that. And we're going to see what the outcomes are. So yeah, clinical practice.
Okay. So, the interesting question I think can be this. We have MD PhDs versus MDs. Mm-hmm. If you're not MD PhD, I know MD PhDs are more into research sometime. That's why, because they are PhD.
Yeah.
And if you are MD and you want to do research, is it applicable for you to do something like what MD PhDs usually do?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do dry lab, wet lab stuff as a MD as well. And I've known many people who do that. And it can be very applicable. I think Dr. Nesbitt, she's like a hypertension, internal medicine physician who actually does a lot of research as well, in addition to like great education. But she explained the best that like we have a level of impact as physicians, and so you have an individual impact on the patient, right? Or their family. But then as an educator, you grow that impact by promoting other physicians to help their patients, right? But then as a researcher, that's like the largest level of impact because you're not just affecting who's in your, near vicinity, but all across the world, different practices. And so that's really cool. And so again, not quite at that level yet. I don't have any earth-breaking ideas, but maybe one day.
What's one thing you wish you would have known before you began your major?
That you don't have to do a science degree. I mean, I learned that as I went along the way, but you definitely don't have to do a science degree. And I think the people who don't do science degrees are sometimes a little bit more interesting. And so I had someone who majored in saxophone, and she was really cool. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want. Make sure to fit your classes in if this is the path that you choose, but you don't have to be a science degree.
And how many different tests or certifications you need to get from starting your medical school to become resident?
So in medical school, there are 2.5-ish boards. This is for allopathic, not osteopathic medical schools. And so there's a difference between allopathic, which is like kind of the traditional medical school, and osteopathic, which is like DO. A little bit different, and I can't speak for the DO because I did not do that. But for MD, there's like step 1, step 2 that happens during your medical school training. And then afterwards, you take step 3 during your intern year or your very first year of residency. And that's how you become a that's when you can be eligible to become a licensed physician and actually start practicing by yourself. Not many people will do that though, because you don't get board certification or anything like that. You still have to go through the processes. So there's step 1, step 2, step 3. Those are kind of the basic that everyone will do. And then every single residency also has their own individual exams. So anesthesia, we also have our own board exams on top of the medical school ones. And so we have basic, advanced. So basic happens during your very first anesthesia year, and then advanced will happen towards the end of your anesthesia residency. And then there's also oral boards and board certification, and so that happens when you're actually graduated. And those are very extensive and hard to study for. And then you have fellowship boards as well. And so for critical care, there will be an individual critical care board, which I heard is very notorious for being very, very difficult.
So many.
Yeah, and then I left out the yearly exams that we have that are called in-training exams, which technically don't really matter for anything. They're more for you to see where you are in your life. But I think it's good to, again, test yourself every once in a while so you can test if you're actually learning things and where you need improvement on. Because if you don't do that, then you don't really know where you're at.
So what advice would you give someone who interested to get into medical school?
I think the best piece of advice that I got when I was shadowing was probably to be present. And at the time I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm here. Like, I know how to be present. But it's not just like being there, but that can also honestly be one of the hardest things to do. It's just like going out there, putting yourself out there, because you're not going to make connections. And I didn't really make connections until I got out of that bubble of being like, oh, I don't really know what's happening. And so being present, not just being there, but also being aware and like taking little pieces and trying to synergize them to like really broaden your own knowledge and perspective. Yeah, don't just be like spacing out during a surgery, like actually be there and be focusing on what's happening.
And what resources do you recommend? It can be book, movies, anything that influenced you.
Don't put too much stock into Grey's Anatomy. All my patients are like, oh, this isn't like Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, it's not. I actually watched House growing up. I watched Scrubs during like medical school. Not very accurate, but it was kind of fun. I don't know. I don't really have any good like common social media type of like books, movies, or TV shows. House of God, I think you should read after at least your intern year. So don't read that too early.
What do you look forward to in the future, either personally or professionally?
I think personally, I look forward to hopefully moving out of Dallas and exploring a different city. Professionally, I look forward to, becoming a critical care physician. I think that'll be something really exciting. Actually getting back in the ICU. I'll be starting off at the ICU next month, actually. And so I look forward to kind of like getting back into that jam and not just the anesthesia side of things.
Is there anything you think I've missed that you want to tell?
I don't know what else.
Okay. My last question. Do you feel happy in life?
Do I feel happy in life?
And what is your definition for happiness?
I think happiness is a very like not temporary thing. It's not a permanent thing. And you can't have happiness without a little bit of sadness as well. And sometimes you can have happiness and sadness at the same time, and that's a very strange emotion. I think happiness is a more complicated thing. And at this moment in time, I think I am pretty happy with how everything turned out, and I'm really excited about where my future is going to go. And I can't say that's going to be like that, later today or later tomorrow or anything like that, but I would say I'm happy. Yeah.
That's nice. Okay, thank you so much, Kathryn, for your time, and I really appreciate it. I know you're super busy, and that's hard to make this time for...
Just for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for you watching this until the end, and please subscribe and like the video, and wait for our future videos that are coming. I'm sure you will love it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.